All right. Andrew Carnegie is regarded as one of the most influential leaders of the late 1800s just because he set such a high standard and he set so many, whether people think they're good and bad, examples for future leaders just based on how he handled things and how he conducted himself. I'm just going to kind of go over a few of the things that I talked about in my paper, starting with his upbringing. Carnegie was raised in a very poverty-stricken area of Scotland. He watched his father lose his job. His mom had to basically borrow money from people just so they could get out of the country and get to the United States. Carnegie worked a lot of different jobs before he got into the steel industry, and when he did, he really didn't look back because he eventually molded himself into one of the most successful businessmen of all time, and at one point he was the richest man in the world. A lot of those other jobs, I believe, like one thing I talked about, led to a very, very high level of conceptual skill, which also kind of ties in with problem solving, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. One of the biggest things I talked about in my paper was referred to as the Homestead Strike, and there were actually two of them, and I think that the way the Homestead Strike was handled is a testament to kind of how he was as a leader, and it gives us so many different areas to evaluate his effectiveness as a leader. One of the main things is when the Homestead Strike actually occurred, Carnegie was not even in the United States. When the Homestead Strike occurred, he left the handling of that situation in charge of one of his CEOs. And his CEO eventually led to the CEO firing over 3,000 unionized employees. And a lot of people believe that they fired these employees so that they could hire non-union employees because they were in the middle of a battle with the contract with the union because the price of steel had dropped. And because the price of steel had dropped, other companies that were non-unionized were banding together. Were banding together to increase profit. And Carnegie's profit had dipped and declined because of this. So what he did is he tried to lower the wages, but the unionized workers were supposed to be guaranteed this wage, so they went on strike. And where the problem solving skill comes in is because when Carnegie got back, he basically was able to work with the union and restructure their contract so that he was still a unionized corporation, but he was able to implement this sliding wage scale that he wanted to, which the wage would increase and decrease based on the price of steel at the time. And I think that was a huge strength of his as a leader, was being able to know what he wanted to get done and being able to work with people and figure out ways around obstacles to get it done. Now, one thing that I thought was a very glaring weakness of him was referred to in the Leadership Gaps module called Machiavellianism. I hope I'm saying that right. Machiavellianism means that they're going to do what they need to do to get it done, whether it's good or bad, and they're going to have some sort of justification for why they made those decisions. For example, before Carnegie died, he donated a lot of his money to the building and to the restructuring of libraries and universities and just different areas like that around the United States. He came under a lot of fire for that because people thought he should have put that money to pay his workers, which if I were in his shoes, I would have done that, because as a leader, of course you need to be worried about profit, and of course you need to be worried about the direction that your company is going, but you also need to be able to have the trust of those workers. And the fact that he was obsessed with profit and obsessed with his personal image and personal accolades, it really showed that the workers and his employees were not as high on his priority list as they should have been, which led to a lot of unhappy employees, which probably could have prevented these strikes in the first place. But because he donated all this money, he came under fire. You should have given this money to the employees, which I think he should have done. But his response or justification was, if I give this money to the employees, all they're going to do is buy better clothes and buy better houses and spend the money on themselves. If I donate the money to the places that need it, to help out the government, basically what he was saying is it's going to make me look better. If I donate the money and give all this money to charity, it's going to make me look better because, oh, well, this is really nice. Oh, well, Andrew Carnegie donated all this money. So he wanted to give his money to charity to make himself look better, but he had a very good justification for that, so that it would kind of keep the critics at bay, which is a testament to the Machiavellianism. But that infatuation with profit and personal image really sacrificed a lot of relationships, and those high-quality relationships with employees that we talk about wanting and talking about needing. I think his productivity and his profit probably would have gone up if he had invested more in his workers earlier on, because he did seem very pro-worker and worker-friendly at the beginning of his career, but then got very selfish and greedy and kind of let his narcissism take over towards the end. Which leads me to another thing. In my paper, I talked about his narcissism being a strength. And I think that narcissism can be a strength if used the right way. Because the narcissists, they're very obsessed with image. They're very obsessed with output and profitability, which he was. And I think him being narcissistic like that really helped his company, because he was the highest producing steel company in the Northeast and probably the entire United States. And that was because he was so obsessed with profitability, he didn't have a problem with extending workers' hours so that he had people working 12-hour shifts around the clock, 24 hours a day. And sometimes people worked 24-hour shifts, and then altering his scale so that he had 3 shifts of 8-hour workers, so that he had a new crew every 8 hours to increase productivity. And I think being a little bit narcissistic in that way and being obsessed with that profitability can help if applied the right way. And all of this comes back kind of to how he handled the homestead strike, because he wasn't even in the country there. And that kind of left me with some questions. If he had been here, would it have been handled differently? Because, ultimately he restructured that contract. But as far as he as a leader goes, I think he definitely could have been worker-friendly more consistently throughout his career, because I think that's ultimately what tarnished his reputation as a leader so much, is not the fact that he was the most profitable and he was the wealthiest man, but a lot of how people are analyzed as a leader is by how their employees feel about them and how they treat their employees, I feel. And I think that is a good analysis for leaders, because you may be the wealthiest person in the world, and you may have the best company in the world, but if nobody wants to work for you, then ultimately that's going to hurt your effectiveness as a leader. So as much as he was achievement-oriented throughout most of his career, if he would have focused more on being that team-level leader or that middle-of-the-road type of leader, I think he could have avoided a lot of conflict with employees, a lot of conflict with the union, and ultimately he could have really increased the quality of relationship that he had with his employees had he had invested more in his employees throughout his career.